So for this project, I shot tons of footage, and I maybe only used 10%. So what I ended up doing, because this was only going to be a 1 to 2 minute video, is I went through every single clip and I created what's called favorites. So I found the parts of the clips that I liked. I made an in point and an out point, or you can just drag that section, and then I pressed F to create it as a favorite. And then once I went through all of these clips, found all the bits that I liked, then you can head into your favorite section and it has all your clips there. So I did one pass, but that was the first pass. Then I do another pass. I go through these favorited clips, which are generally a rough outline of what I like in each clip, and then I create keywords for smaller sections of those clips. So for example, in this clip here, let's say I like the whole clip, but I really like from this section to this section. I'll just select that. I'll hit Command K, and then I can, as you can see, I already have 2 of these here, best and love. So I didn't realize I was gonna go through it another time. So what I did was I created a best keyword. I went through it all one more time, found all of the sections of clips that I thought were amazing, and then tagged them as best. And then I felt that I still had too many clips or too much media, and so I went through all those best favorited clips and added tags that I put as love. And that really helps to narrow down what are the best parts of your clips, because when you're shooting for hours, you're gonna have tons. And Katie is such a professional and knows what she's doing that I was loving almost every single clip. So I really had to scrutinize my camera work, what's in focus, how am I moving. And actually, if I go back to the entire library, I actually created a project initially that was 2 minutes and 15 seconds long. And I was trying to figure out how I should organize these shots, because to be honest, the organizing and placing of your clips takes by far the longest. Color grading takes quite a long time, but just knowing where you're going to put certain shots. And so originally what I had was a back and forth of certain clips. Her at the beach, well, maybe not this part, but it was like her at the beach, then her in this jungle location. And I sent this off to a few people to review, and they all told me it was good, but they said it's way too long. I also felt it was a little bit repetitive, and I felt that as well. I chopped it down into a much shorter video, and I reorganized everything by certain sections. I have a couple clips of her in the forest, a couple clips of her in this grassy area, a couple clips on the beach, and that helped to kind of create more of a coherent story, even though there wasn't much of a story in this video. And then I actually created a little bit of sound design, not too much because the music takes priority. Something I did a lot was add a little bit of a scale in effect by using these presets from mMusicVideo for motion VFX. But you can do this if you don't have a plugin that does it real quickly. Just create keyframes by using your transform tool. Hit your keyframe, go to the end, scale up your image, make it a little bit bigger, and that just helps to add a little bit more dynamic motion into your shots. I also added overlays from Lens Distortions, and I think this pack is called Classic Light Hits. And all this does is add a little bit of what looks like natural sunlight glow to your shot. And I know they have different packs that give off different types of light. Let me just reset everything to kind of show you. Let me hit this here. I'll turn off the color wheels, and I think the position is fine. So yeah, basically it starts off looking like this. Actually, it starts off like this, and then you have to turn it to, I'm sorry, not overlay, you have to turn it to screen, and that's going to blend it into your shot better. And then obviously, because this is way too strong, you could reduce the opacity but that's still affecting your whole shot. So what I do is use a shape mask, and I plop that bad boy in the as far as I can to the right or the left, depending on where the light is coming from. And then I just feather the hell out of it so it looks like a very natural gradient glow. I only used 2 transitions in this video, and I find myself using less and less transitions in my passion projects. I use this one, which is, I think, it's a transition from a Motion VFX plugin called mTransition Light, and all this does is add a little bit of light transition that goes to the next shot. And I found this one in particular was perfect because it lines up with this light that I've peeking through here. If I were to go back and recreate this video, I may take that out, but I think it works somewhat okay. It looks a little cheesy in my opinion, but whatever. Then I also used this film overlay. This film transition. That's like a little film burn type thing. And this is from Motion VFX from mFilmMat, which is a really solid plugin. And then I have a bunch of different things in this Super 8 section. So I have a dirty frame with a sprocket that is from a pack called Cinepax, which is a really cool overlay pack. Highly recommend you check them out. And then I have tons of different presets from, I believe they are all from mFilmMat from Motion VFX, as well as mMusicVideo. So we have some dust and scratches. We have a drop frame effect, which is the reason why it looks like it's shot in a choppy frame rate. We have this light leaks, which kind of shows up. Oh, it does show up a lot more than I thought. We have some grain, some film dirt, film variance, which I'm not quite sure what that does, as well as some blurring, which, as you can see, blurs this section here and leaves this section in focus. And then together it makes this. I really like the aesthetic of that, especially including it in something that's so digital looking. You may hate it. If you hate it, let me know you do hate it in the comments. I'm curious. But as for me, I enjoy the look of it. Something I always try and focus on is matching up shots based on either the position of my subject, the motion of the camera, color, even sound, and that helps to blend shot A and shot B together a little more seamlessly. So focus on this shot. If we listen to this, I wanted that shot to go at that time because I liked how the artist was saying like, I'll be your daydream, and I like how it looks like she's dropping down the tree. I thought it would match very well with that part of the song. That's why I left it for a little bit longer as well. But in what I was saying here, you got this shot pushing in, this shot pushing in, and I even added a little bit of a zoom in here to help accentuate this push in, as well as what we talked about, that overlay and some blurring, so you focus more on her eye here. And then the same thing here, add a little bit of a zoom in as well. Also, something to note is I tried to make it so your eye is not looking too much on different parts of the screen. So if you look at generally where her face is here, it's very similar to where her face is here and here. And this is very important with quick shots. If you have a bunch of quick shots in a row, you really want to make sure that your subject's eyes are not moving around too much. So here we have kind of, you're looking dead center, then you're looking at her face dead center, then you're kind of looking at her eye, then you're looking at that in focus, then you're looking at her hand. And I made sure that these all were in a correct position too, because this shot initially is, actually if I turn this off, well, now it's underexposed, but this shot was like this. And I noticed that when I made it as quick shots, it just didn't have the same effect as if I had it zoomed in. And that's because my eye doesn't have to move too far to find the subject. Also here I have everything zooming in as this music starts to build up to the beat drop again, and then it comes out to this longer shot of her with a zoom out preset. Basically, I'm scaling from close to her to a little bit farther out. So if I play this, and then and leave that clip up for a little bit longer to make it more of an exaggerated effect. I also used a plugin from Motion VFX called the mMovie, and this is a really cool plugin that also, this is not sponsored by Motion VFX in any way, but mMovie adds these cool, natural-looking flares and light leaks to your shot, and then you can adjust them how you want. You can adjust the position. So if I just put this on here, I can move this in different places. And for me, that helps to add a little bit more of a cinematic-looking shot. Part of the reason why I made this less contrasty is because I knew that this particular preset is gonna add a bit of that contrast back. Here I created a little fake rack focus transition, so added an adjustment layer over top, and then I added a defocus effect to the shot and then keyframed it to where it's most out of focus here, and then it just kind of fades back into focus, so it looks like this. So it kind of helps to blend those two shots together. So we have her start to go out of focus, and then cuts to in focus with a longer shot, and that goes with the music. So I color graded this in Final Cut Pro using the plugin Color Finale 2 Pro, which is the closest Final Cut Pro users will get to DaVinci Resolve color grading. It gives you the ability to use things that are equivalent to qualifiers. In DaVinci Resolve, you have the ability to adjust your log wheels, your primary wheels, and tons of other options just within this plugin. So it's infinitely better than the native color grading tools in Premiere as well as in Final Cut Pro. But let's hop into the effects and I'll show you what I got going on here. So I flipped the image, but that doesn't really matter. The first thing I did was, if I bring up my Luma waveform, I brought down the overall exposure of my image because it was just sitting a little bit too high. I wanted to make sure it was at a good even level for when I add the log to Rec 709 LUT. So I just lowered the overall global exposure just a little bit, and then we went ahead and added the S-Log to Rec 709 conversion LUT, which I believe you can find on the Sony website. I could be wrong, but usually these are free to download on specific sites. So now we have a Rec 709 image. Then I went ahead and added Color Finale 2 Pro. So as you can see, a lot went on here. So let's open Edit Layers, and I'll go through what I got going on. So the nice thing about Color Finale 2 Pro is that you can rename your different layers, which you cannot do in Final Cut Pro. So it really makes it easy to see what's going on. So the first thing I did was adjust my contrast and sat. I just added a little bit more dynamic range into my shot by raising my highlights and lowering my shadows just a bit. And then I created an HSL mask in DaVinci Resolve. It's called Qualifiers, I believe. And if I select this, go into my HSL mask, and I'll display the composite mask, you'll see what I'm talking about here. Let me take off the blur. So all I did was I used the hue slider to select the color of her skin, and then I adjusted how much of her skin is selected. I didn't want to select her eyes, so I selected just her skin using this saturation parameter. Didn't use any of the brightness parameter, the Luma at all. And then the key difference between Color Finale 2 Pro and the native color grading tools in Final Cut Pro, because you can do this in Final Cut Pro, the issue is you cannot blur the mask. And just by adding a little bit of blur, it helps to reduce any of that color breakages that you might see in your image. Especially if you're pushing colors a lot, you'll see in a lot of your pixels will look distorted and the color will be breaking apart, and just adding a little bit of blur will help smooth everything over. And so that's exactly what I did here. I believe for this shot, or for this bit, this is the outside. So it looks like all I did was add a little bit of saturation into the outside of the mask. And then for her skin, initially her skin was looking way too warm, way too orange. So I went into the gamma wheel, which is the midtones, and I just swung the wheel towards the teal or the blue in the opposite direction of the orange. So as you can see, if I undo that, if you look at right here, oh, you know what I'll do? Let's go to image analysis. I'll go to isolate. I'll go to ellipse and we'll go on her skin here, just so we can see it more precisely. But you'll see how her skin is not lining up on the skin tone line here. So all I did was take the gamma slider and we pull that down so it's on and touching that skin tone line. So if I take this off, it is a pretty big difference when I turn this off and on. I'm sorry, if I undo this and then redo it. And then I went into my HSL curves and I first adjusted my hue versus hue. This looks like a mess. I probably could have deleted some of these points, but all I did was I wanted to make it so the leaves were yellow. I wanted to go for kind of a purple and yellow complementary color look where the shadows look a bit purple and the leaves look gold almost. So I went to my hue versus hue. I deleted some of these. And the other nice thing about Color Finale is it leaves a nice soft curve here. You can make it smooth as opposed to a linear jagged edge. Then I went to hue versus sat and I lowered the saturation on the greens and the yellows in my image a bit. I went to hue versus luma and I lowered the brightness of my yellows and greens just a tad, just because I thought that this tree was a little bit too bright, so were the leaves, and that just adds a little bit more contrast. Okay, we'll do an example on the beach now. So we have this shot of her. The first thing I did was use that log to Rec 709 LUT. If you're shooting in log, I recommend you just pick up a LUT from your camera manufacturer. Once again, I think you can find it on the camera website, but I'm not entirely sure. So this shot was sitting pretty already. I felt that I didn't need to lower the overall exposure of the shot. Sometimes you'll find, and I'll see if I can find an example later, where you overexpose your image. Say your whole shot's sitting around 75 or so. If you add a LUT to it, it's gonna push everything past 100 and bake that into your shot. So what you're gonna need to do is for sure change the overall exposure of your image, bring that down first, and then you add the LUT on top. That's gonna keep everything within that safe zone. Make sure you're not crushing your blacks or causing any peaking from your highlights too. So that's a little tip that has helped me out, especially if I overexpose my image. And by overexposing, I mean just bringing it up a little bit, not totally destroying my highlights. So I added the log to Rec 709 LUT. I probably could have even brought down my overall exposure just a bit. The next thing I added was contrast and sat. I went into my color curves and started to add a little bit more of a look here. And here's a simple color grade you can do. If you, and by the way, this is a LUT that you can buy on my website. I'll put it in the link. I created a LUT for the beach scene. So if you like the look of the beach shots, feel free to download that if you'd like. No pressure, of course. So if you go into your color curves, you can adjust what hue of the curve you would like. So I brought up cyan and I brought up orange, and all I did here was, let me show you step by step. So add some cyan, right? I'll increase the cyan in my shadows and decrease it in my highlights, maybe a little bit less. And then I do the reverse here. So let me grab my orange and I'll decrease the orange in my shadows by pulling down. Shadows at the bottom, midtones in the middle, highlights at the top. I'll increase the orange in my highlights. And then from here, you can make some minor adjustments. So if you feel like you want less blue in your midtones, you can pull down here. That's gonna make your shot a little bit warmer, as you can see. If you want less orange, you can pull down here. It's gonna make it a little cooler. Looks like her skin is a little bit more accurate there. So maybe I'll pull down just a tad. And then from here, I made it so it wasn't so contrasty. So it looks like I added a little bit of an inverted S by pushing up just a tad on my midtones and shadows, and then lowered my highlights just a bit. And that's gonna create this kind of a complementary color type look. You have cyan and orange, two complementary colors on the color spectrum, and that helps to add some separation in your shot. Okay, and then I went into my hue versus sat curve, which I probably should have done this in Color Finale, because as you can see in Final Cut Pro, it makes like hard lines. It's not as smooth. But all I did was go into my hue versus hue and I adjusted the hue of my sky, or a specific color of blue, to be more of a teal, and that helps to go with this kind of teal and orange type look. And then I increased the saturation a little bit on my blue. I don't think this is doing anything. Yeah, I don't think that's doing anything. And that was it for the look as a whole. It's that simple. And then I just added M-Prism to help add to that effect. That was an example of kind of a clean color grade that was a lot easier to create. Some of these shots took a lot more work, like the shots done with the Helios, and particularly this shot, which I believe I had my white balance set incorrectly. So let me show you what I got going on here. The first thing I did was lower the overall exposure of my image. Her skin is sitting probably, if I were to crop in, let me bring the top down a little bit. So her skin's sitting at about like 60 IRE, and she's being backlit here. It probably should not be 60 IRE. It should be a little bit lower. And so what I did was brought down the overall exposure of the image, and that's gonna help that conversion LUT to sit a little bit better on your footage. So we have log direct 709, Sony conversion LUT. Then I added contrast and sat with this color wheels, and you'll already see that this shot looks horrendous. Clearly my white balance was off. Most people would think it's unsalvageable, but you can definitely tweak it a bit. So I like to color correct using my color curves. So what I'll do is I'll hop in my color curves and I will find what color is predominantly dominating the shot. I go into my color curves, I find that hue, and then I decrease that amount of color in the shot by pulling down on the curve there. So I made those corrections. Looks like I adjusted red, green, and yellow to come up with this. Still doesn't look great. I'm not sure why I then went ahead and added a shape mask, which I tracked. Basically, I tracked following her. This is something you can do in Color Finale 2 Pro where it'll track with your shot. You don't have to manually track like I did here. You can also do it in Resolve, of course. But here it looks like I went into the inside of the mask and I took out some of that green that's in the shot, and I increased the saturation on the midtones. Looks like I took out some of the orange as well. And then I went into the outside of my mask and I lowered the midtones a bit to make it a little bit more contrasty. So we have that. I'll hop back out. Then I went to my color curves again and I added a new color curve since I took up all the color curves here. And I just was thinking to myself, this does not look great. It still looks off color. So I went into my color curves and I took out some of that predominant color. We have a lot of like orange and pink into the shot, and so I took out some of that, and then I also tried to limit the amount of green as well. Then I went into hue versus sat and made some adjustment. I'm not sure what I did here. Oh, I took out the saturation in the very brightest parts of my image, just on her hair here, which doesn't do too much. And then with Color Finale 2 Pro, all I did was go and adjust the color of her skin because it still was not sitting right. If I crop into her skin, you have the adjustment really pushed it back onto the skin tone line here. So all I did was I added that HSL mask like I just went over and pushed the gamma, the midtones, more towards the yellow and the orange to get it back on the skin tone line. But what I did for this instance, because her ear was like glowing red, and I just thought that was unattractive, it was really drawing the eye into the brightness of her ear. And so I targeted just the specific section of her ear. As you can see, just her ear and a little bit of the strap of her dress, and that allowed me to make adjustments just to that. And so I just decreased the saturation from her ear to take out some of that red. And then the last thing I did here was make a trackable mask over her lips that followed kind of a general outline of her lips, and I just brightened her lips a little bit and then added just a little bit of saturation. I didn't want to make it too unnatural, but this ellipse is because I was also getting some like parts of her dress as well. So all I did was I made the HSL mask, and then the ellipse is to make sure that the mask is confined to only her lips. So just the color of her lips are adjusted. And then I was gonna add Beauty Box, but I just felt it softened her skin too much and she didn't need it, so I got rid of it. But so I went from this to this. So a good change. This, of course, is not the best shot, but this is just an example that even if you screw up your shot entirely, even if your white balance is wrong, even if the lens you're using is a little wonky, which although I didn't really adjust it here, but it doesn't play too big of a role in the shot. Even if those things happen to you, you'll be okay if you just make the right adjustments. I will be creating a color grading course in the near future, so if you're curious to learn specific ways that you can color grade in your own videos, make sure you stay tuned for that. You can go on my website and subscribe to my newsletter, and then you will get a discount when I create that course. But thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I hope you have a fantastic day.